Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media conference. I have three main issues that I'd like to deal with today. The first is related to energy. As you all are aware, this government, from inception in September 2015, has been dedicating a lot of time and resource to ensuring that our energy sector is returned to stability. When we came in, we had found a number of outstanding issues. The upstream industry was in a state in that there was no renegotiating of contracts with the upstream gas suppliers, mainly BP, EOG, BHP, and Shell, a new player in Trinidad, or a player that has returned to Trinidad and Tobago with significant investments here. And then on the downstream side, we had a whole host of contracts that had expired or were coming to expiry dates that had not been renegotiated. We also had the CGCL issue, where I was mandated by the cabinet and my prime minister to lead a team, flew out to meet with the government of Japan and to renegotiate certain elements of a contract that were not favorable to our downstream industry in Trinidad and Tobago. We have been providing periodical reports over time as to the progress of the government, and we are happy as a government to report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, including what we did in the energy spotlight not so long ago, that the energy sector is finally returning to a level of stability. You would recall last year, the Prime Minister himself, along with myself, went to Houston, where he successfully brought to conclusion upstream energy contracts with both BP and EOG that allowed us as a country to have the supply of gas from upstreamers EOG and BP continuing to 2023. Then we had gas supply, and then gas prices were agreed, which then opened up a whole stream of new investment on our upstream side. You'd recall that not so long ago, on our downstream industry, energy prices and contracts had expired, and one in particular, the CNC contract with NGC, had come ground to a standstill and had actually led to NGC shutting off the supply of gas to the CNC plant. At the time, there was a lot of unnecessary noise and criticism, but once again, the government has shown that it knew what it was doing, sat down very confidently and calmly with NGC and concluded a very successful agreement with CNC. That contract was concluded. The plant is back up and running. Both parties are satisfied. I can report that NGC continues to have a number of essential negotiations taking place with downstream companies that are currently being negotiated, and we're hoping to bring those to conclusion soon. On the Dragon side, we are continuing to have discussions with Shell, PDVSA, the government of Venezuela, to bring that to fruition and closure as well. Recently, the Prime Minister, along with Minister Khan and myself, attended at BP's head office in London and Shell's head office in London, and had very intense discussions which came out of our recent energy spotlight, where the government for the first time told the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we felt that there was revenue to be had by the people of Trinidad and Tobago that was not being had, and there were areas that we wanted to have discussions with these two companies in particular, Shell and BP, who are the largest upstream suppliers in Trinidad and Tobago of gas, but also, very importantly, are the largest shareholders of our 4 Atlantic LNG trains in Trinidad and Tobago that are very successful, productive, and profitable. But we felt for the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we were not getting the type of returns because those contracts were negotiated a very long time ago. At the time when we announced that and said that it was this government and this administration's position that we would be going to those companies to have discussions and to see how we could improve the revenue stream, again, there were a lot of persons who were naysayers and persons who were very negative, and a lot of commentary that was, in our view, unnecessary. We had ignored it. They said we would destroy the whole energy sector. Quite the contrary. What we've done is we've continued the good relationships with all companies. Commercial parties are always looking to have conversation and discussion. So what happened in London was very positive. You would have gotten reports Both at the time we were there, on the last occasion last week, the Prime Minister would have reported to you all that coming out of those discussions, there was an agreement with both BP and Shell that the government would put its best foot forward. We've retained an international law firm that specializes in energy matters called White and Case. We have Poten and Partners. And you would have heard the Prime Minister say when we were in London and last week that he would be appointing, the Cabinet would be appointing an empowered negotiation team to represent us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, in our discussions with BP and Shell on all of the outstanding issues, including fiscal measures, extensions of production sharing contracts, E&P licenses, but most importantly, discussions surrounding the increasing or the bettering of revenue to the people of Trinidad and Tobago for our gas and the Atlantic trains. Today, I'm happy to announce that the Cabinet has approved the following team to lead the discussions and the negotiations. This is the empowered negotiation team on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago with a sole mandate: go and get the best possible deals for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the best possible revenue for the people and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago from these energy sector multinational giants, BP and Shell, and continue the conversations and the discussions. And we're empowered to go forth and achieve that on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago. It will be led and chaired by the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Senator Franklin Khan. Also joining him would be myself as the Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. We will be joined by the PS from Ministry of Finance, Mr. Vishnu Danpal, the President of the National Gas Company, Mark Loquan, a consultant at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, Mr. Leroy Myers, Senior Energy Advisor to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Mr. Richard Jeremy, and we will also have with us White and Case as the foreign attorneys, Poten and Partners out of the UK, a local attorney who specializes in energy matters, Mr. Richard Beckles, and we will be joined by Mr. Wendell Motley. So this is a team that has been empowered by Cabinet to go and lead the discussions and the negotiations on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago to try and stabilize and better the revenue and fiscal scenario for Trinidad and Tobago, which I must say has been achieved since this administration has come in place. And despite what you may hear and the noise outside, we came in, we met an industry that was in a less than favorable position. We have gone to these companies and said, on the LNG side in particular, we want to have discussions about increased and better revenue for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm happy to see that coming out of the discussions in London recently, both BP and Shell have agreed to sit at the table with this team that I've just announced and with a mandate to better the revenue streams for Trinidad and Tobago. Neither BP and Shell have indicated any negativity or any defensiveness or any lack of willingness to sit at the table with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and have these discussions. It's been quite the opposite. They've put forward proposals. Those proposals are being analyzed, and this team now will lead the discussions along with the requisite international experts, White and Case and Poten and Partners, and we will carry out those discussions and negotiations on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Minister Khan, Minister Young, PS Danpal, Mr. Mark Loquan from NGC, Mr. Leroy Myers and Mr. Richard Jeremy, advisors and consultants in the Ministry of Energy, White and Case, Poten and Partners, Mr. Richard Beckles, a local attorney, and Mr. Wendell Motley. And we begin those discussions within the next couple weeks. White and Case are coming to meet with us, where we will devise our strategy in the next week, and then we will take it from there. I am also pleased to announce that earlier this week, the Honorable Prime Minister had a very productive, vigorous, and detailed conversation with the Secretary General of the United Nations. They both expressed their views. The Prime Minister defended Trinidad and Tobago and what happened recently with the repatriation of the 82 Venezuelans, and made the position of Trinidad and Tobago very clear to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and in particular that we as a sovereign did everything in accordance with our laws, and that we felt aggrieved as a country that a representative of the UN, rather than consult with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and find out exactly what happened before issuing a statement, went ahead and issued a statement that criticized the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The Secretary General of the UN acknowledged Trinidad and Tobago's position, and in fact said that he had spent about 10 years in the field of dealing with refugees and asylum seekers. He actually acknowledged that Trinidad and Tobago, according to UN records, has about 40,000 Venezuelans here, and that we as a government have treated these Venezuelans with the highest levels of dignity and respect, and we've opened our arms to them. But those persons who were repatriated, and according to our records, and we have it both in writing as well as being filmed, they did so voluntarily. And the Secretary General said what he would do is he would dispatch a team from Geneva, a very high-level team, to come and meet with the government of Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that the right facts are put forward, and that he gave an assurance that Trinidad and Tobago continues to be a leading sovereign state in the UN, especially in this part of the region, and that we have an excellent record with the United Nations, and that this should not be a blot on it. The conversation between the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, and the Secretary General of the UN was a very positive conversation, and a lot of acknowledgement to the leadership role, as well as, I would call it, the unblemished record of Trinidad and Tobago at the United Nations was endorsed, accepted, and put forward by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Following that conversation, the Prime Minister dispatched an official letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, putting forward the government's position and Trinidad's position with respect to the incident of the repatriation, the voluntary repatriation of those 82 Venezuelans recently. The last issue on my agenda to discuss before I open up to questions is the matter of the refiling of what has become known as the Eden Gardens matter. You'd have seen that I put out a press release out of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs yesterday with respect to the refiling and the service of these proceedings on Ms. Jearlean John, who is a deputy political leader of the United National Congress, and others, 10 defendants in total. You'd recall that last year, around July 2017, I had a specific press conference where I told the country the type of work that had gone into this matter, the filing of the matter, a number of applications being made to the court where we followed the money and we found what appears to be a bribe paid by those who sold the land to the state for $175 million to a public officer who was the officer that prepared the Commissioner of Valuations report, putting his signature to say that the land was worth $180 million, where a very, very well-respected, independent, private valuator, Lyndon Scott, had valued the identical parcel of land at $52 million, there being just under $120 million, over $120 million spread between Mr. Lyndon Scott's valuation and what the state paid for the land, based on this Commissioner of Valuations report signed by an officer who will have his day in court and will explain to the country what this $50,000 check made payable to him, a public officer, by those who sold the land to HDC and the state for $175 million is about. We have an international team of lawyers, an international team of forensic auditors, investigators, and leading English silk in the area of fraud, leading the team on this matter. We feel very confident as a government, and we will pursue and prosecute this matter all the way through the court system. What happened a couple of weeks ago, actually, when we were in London, was that the judge, who had actually granted the extensions of time, because we filed the case in November 2016, October 2016, and then what you have is a 4-month period before you have to serve the claim 4-month statement and case on the defendants. We utilize that period of time to go to court and to get production orders, Norwich pharmaceutical orders, where we were allowed access to bank accounts. We followed the money. We went back for extensions because what we began to see in the following of the money astounded us, quite frankly. And that is where, in that whole exercise, and we did it on orders of the court. So at no point in time was this done capriciously. We followed the rules. We were granted extensions by the court, allowed to do this work, found this payment. It's not an alleged payment, a payment of $50,000 from the company that sold the land to the state to the public officer who did the valuation at what we claim is a great overvaluation of this parcel of land, over $120 million excessive valuation. It allowed us to do this work. We then amended the proceedings to include that public officer, and we then proceeded to serve the proceedings. All that happened in court within the last couple of weeks was that the judge who granted those orders and those extensions of time for the service of the proceedings, based on applications made by the defendant, reversed the orders, said you should refile the matter, and that is exactly what the state has done. The state will not say very much more on this matter because it's before the courts. We have given instructions to the lawyers to proceed as expeditiously as possible. We expect the defendants to try and delay the hearing of the matter. The state is going to push for the prosecution of these matters as urgently and as expeditiously as possible. We have told the country what it is we've found. To say that various statutory bodies have given exemptions or found no wrongdoing is of no moment, because the work that the state has done, which has never been done before, which is the following of the money, which has led to us finding this, what we call a bribe of a payment of $50,000 to a public officer. Let them go to court and explain it. We will not engage in the grandstanding. We will not engage in the public shouting and the calling of names, etc., etc. Miss John and others will have their day in court, and so will the state. And as we said in our press statement yesterday, we think this is corruption of the highest level. We've also filed, just to remind you all, a number of other matters, cartel matters, where we claim that contractors have done certain things to defraud the treasury of and the taxpayers of Trinidad and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago of hundreds of millions of dollars. We are pursuing those. I can tell you from where I stand as a minister in the office of the Attorney General, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago can expect that there will be more actions being pursued as we follow the money in a number of different areas. Some of the revelations are very shocking, frighteningly so, and very upsetting and disturbing as a law-abiding citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Everyone will have their day in court. This administration will pursue every matter of corruption that is investigated to the fullest extent of the law and all of the way and through all of the courses as is necessary. I'd just like to take this opportunity to those of our young citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the Standard 5 students who sat the SEA exams today, it's all over. Go now and enjoy yourselves until the results come out. I'm sure everyone has done the best that they can. The government of Trinidad and Tobago congratulates them, their parents, and the teachers for all of the hard work and effort in getting through the SEA exams that took place and are now over in the last hour or so. And we wish them all well, and that the parents, teachers, and students can now breathe a sigh of relief and enjoy the rest of their time. Those were the three matters that I wanted to raise, or I was directed to raise today. I'll now open for a few questions. Clint?
Could you, taking off on the Prime Minister's conversation with the Secretary General of the United Nations, could you indicate to us exactly what date he had the conversation on, whether it was a phone conversation or whatever, and based on that conversation and this team which is to come down here, is there the possibility of the UN officials who made the unfortunate comments as they did, a possibility of reprimand or anything like that in the cards?
I was trying to remember the exact date. I believe it was on Tuesday of this week. The Prime Minister had a telephone conference from the office of the Prime Minister to the Secretary General of the UN. Yes, one of the matters that the Prime Minister did discuss and has dispatched in writing is his disappointment, to put it lightly, at the position that was taken by the United Nations representative here in Trinidad, and he made that point to the Secretary General of the UN amongst other points, but basically saying, look, Trinidad and Tobago is a place that has always been hospitable and welcomed persons from other countries, but within the confines of the law of Trinidad and Tobago. So with Venezuela, you're not required to have a visa, but there's a certain amount of time that you're allowed to be here. As I said, it was recognized by an official UN report that we have over 40,000 Venezuelans who have within our borders at that given point in time. There was also a brief discussion about the difference between asylum seekers and economic migrants. As you all are aware, economic migrants are those persons, a category of persons who would leave economic difficulties that they're having in their home country and migrate to another place. For example, what we see taking place in Central America and Mexico, persons trying to get into the United States of America. Those are, by and large, economic migrants, and they are to be differentiated. And the Secretary General of the UN did differentiate between how economic migrants should be treated and those who are legitimately seeking asylum, and the whole process for asylum seeking, and that category of refugees is broken up at least into those two different bands, the economic migrants and those who may seek asylum for one reason or another. We did stress that certainly the evidence has been presented to us at our level suggests that everybody was on a voluntary basis. We've heard suggestion that maybe some of the Venezuelans who were repatriated and on the plane, just a couple, may not have felt or felt afterwards that they did not want to give up their asylum, but that is not the information that was provided to us by the authorities, i.e. the immigration department. And we're told that they did film up at Piarco all of the persons, etc., individually, and they went through a process individually at Piarco, as well as it might have taken place before that, to ensure that these persons were leaving here voluntarily.
UN team be coming?
The Secretary General did not put a date on it. He said that as he came off the phone with the Prime Minister, he would reach out to the office in Geneva. My recollection is UNCHR or something to that effect, an acronym to that effect, and he would reach out to them and ask them to send very high-level and senior members to meet with the government of Trinidad and Tobago to really explore what is it that took place, and if in fact there was some misrepresentation, that would be appropriately dealt with.
When those discussions happen, whatever the outcome is, the UN will basically deal with their own people in the way they see fit.
I would assume so, yes.
Just taking off on that a little bit, because this whole issue in terms of, it also deals with an immigration issue, so nexus into that. And I'm sure you would be aware of the role of local law enforcement with respect to the recent Operation Libertad with human trafficking and so on. But there was a suggestion, seeing that this ties into all of these issues of migration, that is the government considering a possible moratorium on illegal immigrants? That was suggested by a former National Security Minister, Gary Griffith, with respect to how we deal with the whole human trafficking issue, and it has a bit of a spillover into how we treat with refugees and immigrants and that sort of thing. Is that something being considered?
You've identified a number of different areas. Human trafficking, something that unfortunately we're seeing taking place now on the global scale of slavery, etc. Those are different issues to those issues of economic migrants, etc. So I don't want to mix them all up. I am not personally familiar with what I've read in the newspapers and seen being reported of this report, this international report by Interpol, and an operation that took place, and whether it touched Trinidad and Tobago or not. But I can tell you one of the conversations I personally had recently in London when we were there for the CHOGM visit with the National Crime Agency. It was focused on human trafficking, adult and child slavery, sexual exploitation of adults and children in those areas. And on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we reaffirmed that those are matters that we're very opposed to, and that we would do everything we can as a government to work with our international partners to try and reduce that taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, and we certainly will not be providing any sanctuary for any legal activity of that nature. At the time, the NCA said that they were not focused on Trinidad and Tobago, but they appreciated us as a partner and holding out our hands I am not familiar with what it is a former national security minister said or didn't say. Everybody's entitled to their own view. At this time, the government is not considering any moratorium on persons who are here illegally. We continue to apply our laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Recently, the cabinet took a decision to improve the detention center, the immigration detention center, where illegal immigrants or persons who overstayed their time in Trinidad and Tobago are kept, and to make it more humane and to make it more up to standard, so to speak. It is something we take very seriously, but we're not at this time considering any moratorium on persons who have overstayed. But I can tell you, according to the immigration laws of Trinidad and Tobago, there are already in place processes and procedures for persons who feel that they may have a legitimate reason to stay here beyond the time of either their visa or what is allowed by law to make the applications to immigration.
Mr. Young, just for clarity, good afternoon. So in the teleconferencing and that phone call with the UN General Secretary, after explaining the repatriation exercise, it was his view that all protocols were followed and there were no infringement on their human rights.
Was whose view? The Secretary General. The Secretary General actually said that he was unaware of the situation prior to the request for the call by our UN representative, Ambassador Penelope Beckles, on behalf of the Prime Minister in the UN in New York. He said he was surprised, but what he had done after, of course, he agreed to a call with our Prime Minister, was he had called for a report. And what he saw in the report, he needed to get further facts on, etc. And it certainly didn't seem on his report, but he wasn't aware of any statement being issued or where the authority for the statement that was issued came from, etc. But he did say, look, I've asked for a report. He said, you know, the UN, he did say the UN actually appreciates its relationship with Trinidad and Tobago. And he said on a number of occasions that we are a leader. We've never had any breaches of our obligations at the UN, and we're respected at the UN. And this is a serious matter, especially when the head of the government, the Prime Minister, reaches out to him. So he is going to put the resources to have an inquiry done on their side as to what it is. We, on our side, the Prime Minister said that he would make information available, but felt very strongly, based on what reports had been provided to us at the government level, that there was not sufficient conversation prior to any statement being made between the UN and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And we felt and feel very secure and very confident in the information that we've been provided with by our immigration authorities, that there were no breaches, or certainly if there was any breach, it was not 82 persons in complete breach or violation of their rights, etc., repatriated on a plane against their will.
He is yet to make a position on.
Well, he is not really to make a position. I mean, what it is a country has reached out to him, a member state, and said, look, we don't appreciate with how this matter was handled. He has agreed to take a look at it and to see what is going on, and then we wait. You know me, I don't like to speculate, so let's just wait for the outcome of what takes place. Right, any other questions?
Has the government made any direct contact with the actual UN representatives on the ground? And is it a case of not having confidence, having lost confidence in them? Or?
I assume that there may have been conversations post the statement being put out between representatives of the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the representative. I am not sure what the content of any such conversations that may or may not have taken place, but I'm certainly not going to say there was no conversation. The Prime Minister has put in writing his he expressed to the Secretary General of the UN his disappointment as the head of the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the leader of Trinidad and Tobago with how it was handled, and he has followed that up with a letter that was copied to the UN representative here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Just a matter of clarity on the energy negotiation team that was set up. Is that going to be something that is long-term, or is there a time frame in which that negotiation will be?
We had those preliminary discussions with Shell and BP. These contracts, which were entered into varying stages over the past few decades, are very complex contracts, which is why we've found international experts in this area. We want them concluded in a shorter time frame as possible, but we acknowledge that it may take some time, at least periods of months, to get it concluded. One of the conversations we had at that time in London is, can we find interim measures that are mutually agreeable to the government and to these entities until we can conclude the outcome of the discussions that would lead to more revenue for Trinidad and Tobago in that interim period, and they have put forward proposals for that. So what I can say is that both companies, without prejudice to their rights, have already put forward proposals to the government of Trinidad and Tobago that would increase the revenue to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But I expect that the conversations and conclusion of those negotiations will take some time because they're very complex.
Is a question of the vendors.
These are the vendors on Charlotte Street.
Sorry, yes. The Chief Magistrate had taken up a position that the vendors should go on George Street.
Chief Magistrate?
Yes.
Okay.
And the minister and the government, I assume, and that's what I'm getting at, the minister took a position which said the opposite of that. Did the minister or the cabinet consult with the mayor of Port of Spain before overturning the position on the vendors?
All right, first of all, let me admit up front, I don't know of any decision by the Chief Magistrate. So put that aside for a moment. My understanding of what took place is that there was not sufficient consultation and conversation between the Port of Spain City Corporation. Again, I don't want to personalize it to any individual. Between the Port of Spain City Corporation, there's a council led by a mayor, a deputy mayor, between themselves and the affected vendors. When you're dealing with persons' rights, and I've heard it expressed here, I haven't seen it again myself personally, that they're cabinet decisions of some vintage, or historically, cabinet had taken a decision to allow persons to vend on Charlotte Street, then what you have to do is you have to go through a consultative process. I don't think anyone denies that a sufficient consultative process between the Port of Spain City Corporation and the vendors didn't take place. What you then had was an unnecessary rumbling by the vendors whose rights were affected. We saw some persons utilize it and use the opportunity to try and score political points. But at this level, that is central government level. And again, understand the Minister of Local Government is the cabinet representative in that area. He didn't do that on his own volition. So the cabinet stands behind what the minister did. We saw a problem taking place that we felt is an unnecessary problem. Let us just go intervene into it, have conversation with all parties involved, act as a mediator of sorts, make sure that this unnecessary rumbling is contained, and then just basically ask both parties, that is the Port of Spain City Corporation and the vendors, to now have a proper process where they discuss with each other how to go forward. And that's all that has taken place. Again, I saw people standing on the back of a pickup and making a lot of noise and going waving pieces of paper, pre-action letter, etc. Completely unnecessary. As far as we're concerned, we saw something taking place. Central government intervened and have put it back in a position and told the parties, look, carry out your conversations and decide how this thing is going to go forward.
I'm saying here two things. Was the mayor...
There would have been discussion between the mayor and the minister as the representative of central government. Again, I didn't participate in those discussions. I don't get the impression that there is any suggestion that the mayor and the representative of central government, the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, are seeing the world so differently or anything like that. People would go down a road, you'd have a discussion, say, okay, well, let's bring it back in, let's have further discussions, etc. I don't think there's any acrimony between the two.
As though the mayor was sort of humiliated in the process.
I don't think people should see these things as humiliation. We all sometimes find ourselves in positions and you have to just take a couple steps back, reassess the situation, and then go forward again.
Where the whole thing was, you talk about people taking political advantage, you have to admit that the sequence of events gave people the opportunity to say that it is following a pre-action letter that the thing was changed and that their intervention was in fact critical to the outcome.
That's why I use the word opportunist. Opportunity, they saw an opportunity. You know, in football, you have persons who stand on the line of the goal and just waiting for the opportunity and the ball and they just push it in. It's something like that. But we certainly don't see any issue there whatsoever. We expect that they have to make the maximum amount of noise possible, and it's really for the citizens to decide where that falls. But I'll tell you something. Even you, my friends in the media, make mistakes. I have seen very often on page 3 and other pages of a newspaper, you know, an error made. We'd like to apologize for it. I mean, I've had it personally with publications, and I write to the newspaper and they'll say, okay, we publish and we made an error with respect to Stuart Young, etc. So those things, and nobody holds it against anybody. We move on.
Minister, as you took the discussion in that direction, and as you are aware that today is World Press Freedom Day, so and there are certain matters which the government is dealing with on the legislative front, cybercrime and all these other things. So
yes, Clint. I mean, first of all, as a member of the government and a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and as the spokesperson for the cabinet, we would like to congratulate all members of the media. We continue to ask you to be responsible and to report the news responsibly. You carry a very serious responsibility, in my view, which is defending the public interest. But what you always have to balance that with is making sure that you don't fulfill agendas that might be less than honorable. Your duty is not one that I envy. You have to try and get the truth, and the truth for public interest. And I was happy to see, I was reading it somewhere early this morning about 1:30, a report, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but the suggestion was that this administration, or maybe it might have even been in one of the newspapers and an editorial, I can't recall at this stage, the suggestion that this administration, unlike previous administrations, is not at war with the media, and we're not attacking the media. But then it ended with your point saying, however, there's certain legislation that is being proposed that affects the rights of the media. That's accepted. But we didn't come directly to Parliament, try to force it down anyone's throat. My understanding is it's at a joint select committee. There's public consultation taking place. You all would be aware, with the whole advent of social media and how easy it is for persons to hide behind anonymous pages, identities, etc., and just to spew out complete lies, what has become labeled fake news. You have to, as a government and as a legislative body, try to find a way, and it's a balancing exercise, to deal with those instances. The government is open. The Attorney General, the substantive Attorney General himself, is leading this consultation process. We're listening to everyone. At no stage has the government said, look, we're not listening to you anymore, and we're just pressing full steam ahead. And we, this administration, respect the media, we respect your rights, and we just ask that you also continue to respect the rights of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, because I can tell you, the power in your, what's he saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. There's so much truth in that, because what you put out there, even though you might do a retraction after if you've gotten it wrong, the harm is already done. And that's why I say that you carry a great responsibility, and by and large, I believe that you do carry out that responsibility properly, and we just ask you all to continue to, and encourage you to continue to try to get it right and protect the public's interest.
Is it on the Freedom of Press Index? There's an index recently?
I don't know, to be quite honest, I don't know if we've dropped. I mean, there is a, I don't know if it's freedom of press or how the press is treated, etc. I don't know if we've dropped. I'd be surprised if we've dropped. Yes.
The past few weeks, I think we've heard a lot about grey areas in terms of the legislation for refugees, those seeking refugee status, and asylum. The talks with the UN Secretary General and the Prime Minister, did it go in that direction? Can you?
No, I mean, at that level, they don't get into the specifics. As I said, the Secretary General of the UN admitted that he knew nothing about this incident, so that means it wasn't even on the radar at that higher level. and it's when we made the request for the conversation that he then asked for a report. As you would be aware, you have a number of international treaty obligations, you then have domestic law, etc. What I can tell you is that this administration had, I'm trying to remember now, I believe we did pass a policy for how these refugees are to be, for how refugees are to be dealt with, and then pass that on to a team that has to move towards the implementation of the policy. And we recognize that there are situations where, even though we're a small island and even though we have our economic difficulties, we must provide, or we can provide, a safe refuge for those who may need it. And if we're called upon, we will do so. I mean, last year you all would have seen examples of where our CARICOM neighbors suffered as a result of natural disasters. And the Prime Minister stood right here, and he's the one that made the cry on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago and our citizens. Open your homes, let's see what we can do. I want to re-emphasize, because this is the most important point, the persons who were repatriated were all at the International Detention Center and all in breach of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. So these aren't people that you just went and the authorities capriciously grabbed them off of the streets, and quite the opposite. They had gone through a process, whatever the process is. Some may have been through a court process, some may have been through the Immigration Act process, where they're found to have overstayed. There are appeal processes in there that special investigators can hear it. They had all been through those processes, and they were in breach of the local laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is their government that said, we will send a plane to take them home.
I was just to confirm that we did drop 5 places on the Press Freedom Index.
Who does that measurement?
It's done by the Reporters Without Borders.
I would be interested to know what are the metrics they have used there.
They use the Cybercrime Bill, the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Data Protection Act, and they also cited this incident with the A&V attack on 2 members.
Of course, you'll recognize that the A&V attack and the allegations related to that attack have nothing to do with the government whatsoever. Those were private citizens who had issues with members of the media and did whatever it is they are alleged to have done. At no point in time did the government or the administration seek to protect that, cover that up, etc. We've never done that, this administration. I understand if it is linked to those pieces of legislation, all of which, apart from the Data Protection Act, the other 2 acts are currently before the Parliament in one form or the other, and are the subject of public consultation. So it is not to say that the government again has come and said, take this legislation, take it or leave it, this is what we're implementing, tough luck.
Minister, I know you can't say anything further with respect to the agency matter, but that's fine. But there's another corruption matter which has been engaging the government's attention, specifically Cambridge Analytica. Now, you will be aware, of course, that Cambridge Analytica is currently in a process of folding, and apparently they are actively seeking to discredit the whistleblower in this case. So does that development at all, how does that impact on what the government is intending to doing in terms of getting to the bottom of what happened here via Cambridge Analytica entity under the last government?
Cambridge Analytics and what is taking place there has become a major international scandal. So it's on the spotlight of all of our international media. Unfortunately for us in Trinidad and Tobago, we feature in that, and we feature in that as a result of what has happened historically. Allegations have been made by that whistleblower that during a period of time under Kamala Persad-Bissessel-led government, he had meetings with the Minister of National Security, they did certain work, etc. This government has not said much more than that. This government is doing the best that it can to find out what this is all about, and we've reached out to international partners. We're trying to gather documents, evidence, because we never just jump out and say anything. We always make sure that we have evidence behind it. The limited amount that the government has said has all been based on international media reports as well as what may be in our possession. You would have heard the Attorney General announce when he made a statement in Parliament that this matter will be placed before a Joint Select Committee of Parliament to inquire into how Trinidad was affected or what role Trinidad and Tobago played in it. I suspect we will also have a debate in the Parliament with respect to it. And interestingly, some people came out very early o'clock and said, we have nothing to do with that. In fact, I remember the leader of the opposition being on a political platform saying, Stuart Young has said something, and Stuart Young and his puppets in the media. I have no puppets in the media who said this. And then shortly thereafter, on the international screen, quite embarrassingly, in a parliament of a foreign first world country, we had Mr. Wiley come and say, I engaged on behalf of these companies, Cambridge Analytica and its affiliates and associates, with the then government of Trinidad and Tobago. So let's wait and see how it unfolds.
I just want to ask you about Maxi Coffee. Now, I read that he is getting ready for surgery. Now, I would imagine after that there would be need for recovery time, so that adds to the time that he would have been absent from his position as Member of Parliament. I'm wondering if the government is going to make a decision, or have you all put a time frame to say, okay, we're going to make a decision on this seat, because I think it's, what, 8 months now, he unfortunately suffered that second stroke. What, 9 months? Right, about 9 months. So we're looking at absence of a year plus, maybe even more. Anything from the government regarding this seat?
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address this, because it dawned on me as I was reading the newspapers this morning and seeing various posts on social media, some of which quite frankly were disturbing, that let's remember at the end of the day, Minister Maxi Coffee is a human being. Let's remember at the end of the day, Minister Maxi Coffee has a family. Minister Maxi Coffee has gone through a medical episode that I wouldn't wish on anybody. I was very happy personally and thankful to see when the photographs, I've spoken to him on a number of occasions, we text message, etc. But happy to see when those photographs surface, that we see that he is making progress. I know he was making progress. And I'd just like to really plead with the people of Trinidad and Tobago, find that humanity in yourselves and understand at the end of the day we're dealing with another human. And put yourself in his shoes. Would you really, and his family's shoes, would you really want some of the, not the media here and the mainstream media, but some of the nasty comments I see, and in particular that former Minister Devon Maraj posting on social media? It really, really is unnecessary. At the end of the day, this is a human. We pray for his speedy recovery. The government is not at this stage considering anything to do with his position as a Member of Parliament. We are just there really banding together, hoping and praying for a colleague to recover as speedily as possible and to return to Trinidad and Tobago to assume his duties. Any ministerial appointment is within the sole discretion of the Prime Minister. You would have seen what the Prime Minister did recently. So he's accepted that Minister Coffee could not function as the Minister of Public Administration and Communications. He's now the Minister in. Remember, he's a human being and an individual we're dealing with who has done absolutely nothing wrong. He's had a medical episode. He's incapacitated for a period of time, and he's making a recovery. Let's pray for his speedy recovery and his return to Trinidad and Tobago.
Outside of the nasty comments, I think that one of the difficulties is that many people, when Minister Coffee left, we were just told what you said, the medical episode, and people had no idea of how severe his situation is. So
well, let me tell you something.
Seen it for the first time, many people were sort of shocked, even though it's supposed to show that he's recovering and looking well and so on.
When it comes to medical episodes and it comes to a person's health, etc., you can never predict how it goes in. Somebody could say, look, I have a pain in my chest. They could go in to see the doctor, and next thing they come out with a diagnosis that they're riddled with cancer, etc. At the time, and we've always provided the information, the best information available to us. I remember the Prime Minister and myself leaving a post cabinet, going down to St. Clair when Minister Coffee was there, and having great conversation with Minister Coffee, etc. Things sometimes improve rapidly, things sometimes unfortunately take a turn for the worse. What happened is when he was air ambulanced out of here, and he expected a certain progress to take place, there was a bit of a regression. Again, people who are recovering after medical, and I'm going to call it a medical episode, you just don't know how it's going to unfold. And I think I'm just going to say, let's all remember it's a human we're dealing with at the end of the day. The government has nothing to hide. We're not pretending. Can you imagine how distasteful it is. You put yourself in a position that you know your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, yourself are trying to recover in a hospital, and then people are putting out there that you're dead, for example. That's completely distasteful. On what basis are you saying that Akash Samaru is dead when he's sitting down right here in post-cabinet, or anybody else for that matter? Imagine the trauma that the family then has to go through to deal with these things. And I really personally find it's very distasteful. Again, there's hope for his success. A lot of fuss and effort was made over the money that the cabinet took a decision to put forward to his treatment. That ceiling was reached and met. I can tell you personally that members of the government have gone and we've written personal checks to help Maxi Cuffy and his family get through this. And that is how we should operate, always standing ready as humans to do the best we can for those in a time of need. Be there a minister, be there somebody else who's not a minister.
I mean, the criticism here is, I mean, yes, people understand he's a human being and whatnot. The Prime Minister appoints his ministers, but as an MP, he was elected by his constituents, and a marginal constituency. And yeah, he's a human being, but people are saying he also has a job to do, and if he can't do that job, then there needs to be somebody there.
And at this stage, the government has said we're giving him the opportunity to recover and to come back and fill that role. What I can tell you we've done as a government is we've appointed certain ministers to go and ensure, and the Prime Minister at the cabinet level has instructed all of us to ensure that the constituents in, I believe it's Talparo, are getting the type of service they need, etc.
Are you afraid of a by-election?
No.
Mr. Minister, you would have mentioned a policy a while ago that I believe you said was put forward last year to be implemented concerning
refugees, yes,
and so forth. I believe it was in the Senate last week that the Minister of National Security said that laws concerning those things are not enforced. The head of immigration, Gandhi Andrews, would have said that it's a gray area, that we are lacking laws concerning that. So what I want to know is, because in terms of what is being done to clear up these gray areas, to make it black and white, so that things like what happened with the repatriation of the Venezuelans don't get muddied.
Okay, first of all, let's separate what happened with the Venezuelans, because you know the government's position, that was all done in accordance with the law. There will always be mischief makers who try to make it appear otherwise. The first thing is government has to have a policy. Once you've decided a policy is how you're going to deal with things, it then goes through different stages, one of which will result in legislation. So my recollection of the policy is these are the areas internationally and the types of legislation that can exist. We took decisions as to what is the type of models we would like to adopt, and that was part of the policy, that we would treat people in a humane manner and do as much as we can, etc. That is then moved, and the Ministry of National Security is the body, because immigration falls under them, along with the Attorney General, move to, okay, you all go off now and try to find a way to implement government's policy. And I assume that is the process that's taking place.
So is it the implementation stages is what you're saying?
I would think so, because at our stage as a cabinet, we took a decision as to what the policy should be. And once we do that, it then moves through different channels to become law, etc., etc.
Talks with UNHCR, which government is supposed to be having concerning the same. How is that going?
As I say, the conversation between the Prime Minister and the Secretary General took place on Tuesday. The Secretary General said he will reach out to UNHCR in Geneva. So I'm not sure whether they have already written who it is they would have written to, whether it be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Security, etc. Hasn't come through the Office of the Attorney General. And I expect something to happen. When it happens, I am sure we will let you all know. All right? Yes.
There was an article in the Express earlier this week which made reference to a Defence Force report regarding the matter with the Attorney General and his children, making a complete opposite statement that the AG would have made regarding his invitation. Is it in the position of Acting Attorney General, are you able to, because I think the article, said at that time that the AG could not respond because he had not seen the report. Has the report been seen yet, or are you in a position to comment on what?
No. Yeah, I saw what you said, that the Attorney General said he is not enough. That is something specific to the individual. It's not specific to the office. It's something specific to Mr. Faris Al-Rawi. He said he had not seen the report. I have no reason to disbelieve that whatsoever. Again, I have only seen what I saw suggested in the newspapers. That report has not surfaced at any area that I am in whatsoever.
Went to the, went with the, well, I don't know if you went, but you all went to the same place on the same day at the same time. Were you invited or did you ask to go?
Me personally, invited. I don't want to go anywhere, you know, so I do ask to go anywhere. All right, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time here this afternoon, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.